Well, believe it or not, Ripley has made it into space because, as we know, the SpaceXdragon capsule completed its ISS docking, and it was a major breakthrough for NASA and its space program. So Ripley, that was on the Dragon X, has made it safely into the space station. Tom Lellist, and we're going to read from Ars Technica as well, SpaceXdragon X says on Express UK, the capsule has successfully docked with the International Space Station, and it marks the second major step to returning astronauts to space from US soil. And the Falcon 9 rocket carrying the Dragon capsule blasted off from Cape Canaveral yesterday morning, completed its journey to the ISS around 11 o'clock UK time today, and astronauts on board the space station completely checked ahead of the opening of the capsule's hatch, welcoming its only passenger, which was, of course, the dummy named Ripley. Dragon will spend 5 days attached to the ISS space station, and the astronauts will be continuing their tests on the capsule before it comes hurling back to space. Mission control scientists cheered loudly as the spacecraft computers automatically docked the module without human assistance. NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine said, "This is critically important. We're on the precipice of launching American astronauts on American rockets from American soil again for the first time since the retirement of the space shuttles in 2011. Dragon blasted off from NASA's Florida spaceport in the middle of Saturday night, watched by thousands of fascinated onlookers, and it reached space minutes later. After completing docking checks, astronauts from the ISS entered the Dragon capsule, and they welcomed the passenger, of course, the only one there, dummy Ripley, and they welcomed him on board the ISS space station. America has relied on Soyuz from Russia up to now, the Soyuz spacecraft, for 8 years after NASA retired the space shuttle in 2011. US and European astronauts, including Britain's Tim Peake, began their journey into space from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in central Kazakhstan. Of course, they were being piloted there. The astronauts were being piloted by the Russians up to the ISS, but NASA hopes private firm SpaceX, owned by billionaire Elon Musk, will be holding the key to cost-effective transportation for the astronauts to the ISS in future, meaning that today's docking represents the next major step in America's space program, and if the program continues to go as planned, SpaceX and NASA plan to send humans back into space from the US very soon, that is, later this year. So as Ripley got there, he was I guess you would say, the representative of humanity entering the ISS. It was right on schedule. The Crew Dragon spacecraft fired its Draco thrusters early Sunday morning, docking safely to the ISS. This soft capture came at 5:51 ET when the station was 418 kilometers above New Zealand. The hard capture, when 12 additional latches secured the spacecraft to the station, occurred 10 minutes later. This marked the completion of a major milestone for SpaceX and NASA. It was the autonomous docking of the Dragon spacecraft with neither the assistance of crew on board the station nor the robotic arm used to grab and guide the cargo version of the Dragon spacecraft during supply. Speaking on Space Agency's webcast shortly after the capture, NASA astronaut Bob Behnken noted the smoothness of the operation. He says it's one more milestone that gets us ready to fly for flight, and he said along with fellow astronaut Doug Hurley, they will fly the first crewed mission of the Dragon spacecraft later this year or early 2020. NASA last used the docking port on the space station during the final space shuttle mission when Atlantis visited way back in August of 2011. The shuttle Atlantis docked operations were labor-intensive, and they required a lot of manual flying and up to 4 crew members on board the orbiter who had to actively monitor systems during the approach. with a crew-rated Dragon capsule, at least when everything goes right, at least like it did today. Hopefully, the astronauts on board will be observers as the spacecraft docks automatically by itself, autonomously. So this is very different from what was taking place in the past. Because of this requirement to steer itself towards the station, Saturday morning's docking procedure were closely watched. This is very different from birthing a cargo Dragon, said former NASA astronaut Garrett Reisman, who played a senior role in the development of the Crew Dragon spacecraft at SpaceX from 2011 up to 2018. Docking requires a number of things to go right. Dragon had to find the proper corridor to approach the station. Then it had to attempt to attain proper relative velocity, and then navigate its sensors to do the work. And the new docking adapter installed in 2016 on the station for Dragon and Boeing's Starliner capsule had yet to be tested, but a visiting spacecraft also went through its first operational use. The Russians were concerned enough about Dragon's approach that they did not sign off until late last week, and the Roscosmos cosmonaut on the station, Oleg Kononenko, was instructed to remain in the station's Russian segment during the docking procedure in case of an emergency. Had the Dragon crashed into the space station, all three crew members on board, that is Kononenko, the Russian, NASA's Anne McLean, and Canadian David St. Jacques, would have moved into one of the Soyuz capsules attached to the station for safety. This proved thankfully unnecessary, and in fact, shortly after the docking of Roscosmos, Dragon X, Roscosmos did congratulate NASA with a nice GIF of the maneuver. You can see it here. I'll leave a link below for you on Ars Technica. After leak checks, the crew on board the station proceeded to inspect the docking adapter between the station and the spacecraft. The crew then donned protective air masks as a precaution before opening the hatch to ensure there were no particulates in the air that may have escaped during launch or spaceflight. And then finally, at 8:07 a.m. ET, as the space station flew over the Atlantic Ocean, St. Jacques opened the hatch and entered Dragon inside. He and Kononenko took atmospheric readings to ensure its safety before circulating air between Dragon and the station. Soon they had begun transferring cargo from the spacecraft into the ISS station. The Dragon will now remain attached to the station until early Friday morning, at which time it will unlock, fly away from the station, and return back to Earth. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition, and the community around our church. Thank you.